Steve here from RSM, and welcome to our latest edition of our Coffee Conversation series. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Melissa Hopkins. Melissa is the Chief Marketing Officer for Optus. And Melissa, welcome. Really good to see you again. It's been quite some time.
It has.
Since we've seen each other. So it's fantastic that you can be here with me in Brisbane today.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Now, as you know, this is a conversation over a coffee, and so the starting question has to be, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking a piccolo with a sugar.
Piccolo with a sugar? Oh, that's probably a new one. So I'm having the standard oat latte, both from our friends at the Hideout downstairs in our building. So very good indeed. So Melissa, again, welcome. Really, really good to have you here. Maybe just to start, kick things off, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, who is the real Melissa Hopkins?
I don't know if the real Melissa Hopkins, I should say, it may be a little X-rated, but I'll talk about my professional Mel Hopkins. So, look, I've been working in the communications and media and marketing industry for over 25 years. I have spent the bulk of that actually working globally. So in the UK, Japan, the US, and across Europe. So that was around 25 years doing that, and relocated back home coming up 7 years now. My career has been built on, if I'm really honest, it's never been a sort of deliberate career pattern. I've fallen into opportunities, and opportunities that I tend to fall into are ones where there's lots of transformation and change. So I've come to learn I hate managing the status quo. And I like a little chaos.
Awesome.
And business growth. So look, throughout that period, I have worked on businesses and brands ranging from British American Tobacco, Fujitsu, or their B2B, the British Army for 4 years, which was remarkable, and that was when they were in combat in Afghanistan. So that was a pretty special time in my career. Absolute vodka.
You probably needed that.
I needed that. I've sort of done weapons, tobacco and alcohol, which is sort of kind of interesting. And then sort of moved into more the tech sector. So I looked after all the global marketing for Vodafone out of London for a few years. I then did some consulting. So I did some consulting for Docomo, another Japanese telco, and an amazing VC firm out of LA called Andreessen Horowitz. You may be familiar with them, which was fab. And then, with my family, we decided to move back here to Optus, and pretty much since then, Optus Australia, and pretty much since then I've been at Optus. That's sort of a whistle-stop view of my career.
Fantastic. And that's a really good segue, because the next question is, can you tell us a little bit about Optus, about your experience? And you've been there for a little while, so if you could kind of share a little bit about that.
6 years. And I'm immensely proud of what we've done as a brand and a business during that period. It's a really challenging category. It used to be a category that was printing money, and you're now looking at ROIC that sort of sits at around sort of 3%, which when you're going and asking your investors for billions of dollars to sort of invest in network infrastructure, you can appreciate. They're pretty pushy because the return is so low. So it's been a really amazing journey and example of how do you build a brand and business that really starts driving more EBIT, but also pulls you out of being a sort of commodified industry. And I'm super proud that now as a brand, Optus sort of stands on its own 2 feet there. We don't really see our competitors as Telstra and Voda. Of course we do on the balance sheet and when we're speaking to investors. But for us, we very much have a vision to be Australia's most loved brand, and we put ourselves up there with a Bunnings or a Woolworths or NRMA to sort of get that share of mind for individuals. And, we've seen great results in being Australia's strongest brand for a couple of years running. The marketing team has been recognised globally and locally, which is just amazing. And also been just really instrumental in driving really strong growth for the organisation. So it's something I'm really, really, really immensely proud of. Yeah.
And I can just see the passion. I mean,
it's
it's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know many other organisations. I don't think there's any organisations in Australia that have a Chief of Optimism in Daniel Ricciardo, and a Chief of Inspiration in Ash Barty, and building even partnerships out like that have such a huge role, not just externally, but also internally for our people. We've got 6,000 staff, is really special, and I'm immensely proud of that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. And just to see the passion is infectious. Interestingly, and of course, you know, for those that are watching this segment, you know, in recent times, Optus has had a couple of challenges, and that's probably the understatement of the year.
Yeah.
But maybe if you could talk us through, you know, the challenges that you've been through in your role with Optus, and certainly the positives that you've just worked through are extraordinary.
Sure.
But just share with us, if you wouldn't mind, a few of those challenges and how you've dealt with those.
Look, I think you would have had to be sleeping under a rock if you didn't know that on September 22nd we had a really massive cyber attack with 9.7 million customer records breached. And that is something that shook us all really to the core, and none of us had ever experienced before. And until our friends at Medibank, it absolutely was the largest cyber breach in Australian history. It was, you know, an unbelievable period where the brand, so I'll talk about a couple of things, but the brand that was sort of sitting at first choice in market went pretty much overnight to a plummeting low, which in itself is sort of, you know, heartbreaking, and actually Brand Finance's latest report has said that the breach has wiped $2 billion off the value of the brand, which is obviously important sitting on a balance sheet. But I think actually probably more interestingly, it is just sort of how we came together, what we learned, and as much as cyber had always sat on our risk profile, so like every large organisation, you've got your risk profiles, and I suspect there's not many in Australia that doesn't have cyber in the top three. Living through it's quite different. So for us, the really big thing was just trying to understand what the hacker had. We were able to close down the attack within 48 hours of finding out about it. But 20 terabytes worth of data was taken, which is around 30 million different lines of data. And we had to work to reconstruct all of those so we knew what information the hacker had taken so we could go contact the customers. Probably the thing that threw us the most, so, you know, Optus has a very big cyber team, and actually our national head of cybersecurity we recruited 18 months ago from the Bank of England. So we thwart about 2 million attacks a year on our systems. You know, we obviously were working through that. We chose to go to the press first before we actually had to. So we obviously told the AFP. We had a period where we could not identify, but we felt both for Australian businesses and the public, it was best that we went out, and we knew that going to the press first was going to be the most efficient and effective way. But what we hadn't prepared for was the backlash from both the press and a lot of the government commentary around it, and I think it's fair to say that knocked us really all for a six.
Yeah. I can imagine. And at a personal level, it must have been a very challenging time, you know, through all of that.
Absolutely, and you know, I think that, you know, that was another thing that was so super surprising around it for a number of the executives. So what had happened within 48 hours of the breach being found and then announced, our CEO split the business into two. And I was in a really tight team, which was the Crisis Management Executive Committee, and our CFO became designate CEO for the period because we didn't want the whole business caught up in this. So, we worked as a tight team and pretty much didn't sleep for 30 days. We had war rooms downstairs, and you can just imagine just trying to trawl through the data and sort of sorting all of that out was absolutely challenging. But the personal trolling that happened to a number of executives, me included, I was not prepared for at all. And we all had on LinkedIn and emails really horrible messages that had nothing to do with your role. That I think really a lot of it was just fueled by the media, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, it must have been certainly say it's a challenging time is an understatement. Maybe we often say every cloud has a silver lining. That's a pretty dark cloud, Mel. But tell me, were there learnings in a positive sense? Is there opportunities that came out of that adversity? What tell us a little bit about
So,
that.
I mean, look, I think, firstly, I sort of say to people, I felt like I did this sort of MBA module on cyber run by the Navy SEALs, if that makes sense. So, your head's been put under the water all the time to see if you're resilient enough. What I've learned in the world of cyber is unbelievable. And, my role is to protect the brand and communicate to our customers. I'm not a cyber specialist. The fact that the second person our head of cybersecurity called was me when it happened goes to show as an organisation how we've pulled together and understand the importance of these things on the brand. The other thing that was remarkable that we learnt through this is, thank goodness, we'd built such a tight culture. Because in moments of crisis, you can tend to get a lot of finger pointing and toxicity. And none of that happened. None of that happened. And through the tight team, actually, I was amazed at just how much thought was put into the health and safety of all of the individuals involved, and that we all felt comfortable if we needed to have a bit of a cry on someone's shoulder or have an outburst, that was really, really acceptable. So if the culture had not been built beforehand, I think it would have been a very, very, very different way that we shepherded and approached and held each other up. I think the other massive learning for me is just how unprepared Australian businesses, actually some of our government departments and Australians are around cyber. So we all know it's out there, but the impact, the complexities that it has on businesses, and actually just realising that a lot of the time these hackers, the bulk of them aren't based here in Australia, which makes it incredibly difficult for the AFP, we're working with the AFP and FBI, that even if they do identify them, to bring any true justice. And that the big education needs to be about how do we explain to Australians around the risk of cyber, because the criminality of it is massive. It's also just taught me to be more resilient, I think, as a leader and sort of lean into it. So it's an odd thing to say that I'm glad that I've gone through it. Because I think it's made me a much, 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 much better leader. I don't wish it on any organisation.
I'm sure.
But yeah.
Look, thank you so much, Mel, for sharing that quite personal story as well with us. And thank you all once again for joining us. Once again, thanks, Mel. Really appreciate the time. Good to catch up again after so long. And look forward to seeing all of you. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.